done.
So, besides the writing of William Burroughs, where have the ideas of Korzybski found their way into literature?
I suppose there must be some influence on Ginsberg because he was so heavily influenced by Burroughs. To me, though, the equivalent of Korzybski in literature is Joyce's Ulysses, which has lots of is's in it, and because the narrative voice keeps changing throughout the book, you gradually begin to realize you can't trust any one reality tunnel. Everybody is perceiving a different day in Dublin on that particular day. That day when, as Edna O'Brien wrote, nothing and everything is happening.
Now, you hold a particular reverence almost for Joyce, it seems. What is it about Joyce that you find so fascinating?
Oh, there are many, many things, but I suppose the principal thing that comes to mind is inexhaustibility. If I like a book a lot, I tend to read it a second time and sometimes a third time. Ulysses and Finnegan's Wake, I never stop reading. I'm continually rereading them or picking them up and reading a couple of pages or reading a chapter. I got Ulysses on videotape. It was a 30-hour reading done by some of the best actors in Ireland, done on RTE in 1982, and I recorded it on videotape because you don't have to change the tape so often. You can get 6 hours on a videotape, and I got the whole 30 hours. Every now and then I play some of that. Instead of reading the text, I just lie back and listen to the music of the words.
Is that an unabridged reading?
Yeah, it's a total. They read the whole goddamn text from stately plump Buck Mulligan right up to Yes I Will, Yes, the whole damn text, and they had some fantastic actors. Best actors in Ireland. And they all changed their intonations as the styles changed, too.
So it's his inexhaustibility in the sense that he creates a world?
Yeah, I will talk about Finnegan's Wake later, maybe, but that one day in Dublin, June 16, 1904, everything is happening. It's a very ordinary day, to quote Edna O'Brien again, a day when nothing and everything is happening. But in that day, Bloom goes to a funeral, and he goes to a maternity hospital to visit a woman friend who's in labor. So you have birth and death. He visits a whorehouse, and he visits a church. He visits a newspaper office where they're all quoting outstandingly hilarious examples of pompous political speeches. And he passes through the library where they're all discussing Shakespeare. Everything is going on at once in Ulysses, every aspect of human life. Bloom defecates in chapter 4. Masturbates in chapter 12 and urinates in chapter 17. You know, everything that happens in an ordinary day.
And according to Joyce's own descriptions, what was he trying to do with this text?
Well, Joyce was not much given to explaining himself. He dropped hints. It seems to me one of Joyce's major motives consisted of trying to push realism to the point where it refutes itself. He'd read and been very heavily influenced by a lot of naturalistic writers, Zola, Thomas Hardy, and especially the plays of Henrik Ibsen. Ibsen, of course, gradually moved from naturalism to expressionism as his career went on. But Joyce felt that if he pushed realism far enough, it would collapse upon itself. The closest you can get to realism, it seems, in literature, is the style Joyce uses in most of Ulysses, which is the interior monologue. You're inside one person's head and you're perceiving the world as that person perceives it. Then you jump to somebody else's head, the style changes, and you're perceiving the same day from an entirely different perspective. So the closer you get to realism, the more you realize there is no reality. There are realities plural, or reality tunnels, to quote Timothy Leary. Leary, by the way, said Joyce's prose prepared, to quote, give the exact words, Joyce's prose prepared me to enter psychedelic space. I would say that Joyce is best read while you're stoned, and if you've never had a psychedelic, reading Joyce is the next best equivalent. Yositani Roshi, with whom I studied Zen briefly, I don't mean to claim I got very far with it, but I studied briefly with Yositani Roshi. He said once, there's nothing special about Satori. You do it every night in your sleep. Zen is just a trick for doing it while you're awake. Well, you might say Ulysses and Finnegan's Wake are two other tricks for doing it while you're awake.
Doing what?
Achieving full recognition of the difference between the map and the territory, or between your subjective evaluations, which you can be sure of, they're since your own, and the objective reality, which you can never be sure of. All you can know is your own subjective interpretations of objective reality. You can only know the map. You can never fully know the territory. Besides, the territory is changing all the time. Universe is none simultaneously apprehended.
Now, is Joyce denounced as a terrorist?
Well, as a matter of fact, frequently he was, yes. A lot of the first criticisms of Ulysses were denouncing it for its obscenity and blasphemy, which was just Joyce being naturalistic. This is the way people talk. These are the things people do, and so on. And if the fiction has never dared face up to it before, well, if you want realism, I'll give you realism until it collapses on itself, as I said. One recent article defined Joyce as a one-man literary IRA. In a sense, Ulysses destroys English literature because the whole history of English literature is parodied in one part of Ulysses or another. T.S. Eliot said Ulysses demonstrates the futility of all styles. No matter what style you write in, you're not conveying reality, you're conveying a style. And so Joyce does parodies of Mort Arthur, Dickens, Swift. The whole history of English literature is in Ulysses. And every framework changes the way you see the events of that one day in Dublin. You can always find clues as to the objective reality behind all these reality tunnels, but you can never fully define it. For instance, Bloom is carrying on a romantic correspondence with an unknown woman. He signs himself Henry Flower, and it's quite obvious he does not intend to meet this woman ever. He doesn't want to have a sexual affair. He likes to play with the game of pretending he's going to meet her and have an affair, and he's leading her on, but he's too timid to actually do anything as outrageous as commit adultery in Dublin in 1904. His wife is a little ballsier than he is in that respect. But readers a long time assumed that the woman's name, Martha Clifford, was her real name. And then somebody raised the question, if Bloom is using a false name, could she be using a false name too? So there's been a big hunt among the female characters in Ulysses to pick out the most likely suspect to be the one that Bloom is corresponding with. The current leading contender is Nurse Cahill, whom he meets in the maternity hospital, which makes their whole meeting absolutely hilarious. If you think she's the one he's been corresponding, neither one of them knows that the other is the one they've been corresponding. And that's very typical of the kind of humor that appears throughout Ulysses, mixed in with all the tragedy. Bloom's day is overcast by the funeral in the morning, which reminds him of his father's suicide and of the fact that his son died at only 11 days old. And so although Bloom is a basically cheerful person, there's an undertone of grief that keeps surfacing in his thoughts, and he always cheers up again. And if it isn't Nurse Cahill, it could be Blazes Boylan's secretary, whose first name is Martha, which makes for a very intriguing pattern because, as one Joyce scholar discovered in the Wandering Rocks chapter, when Boylan calls his secretary Martha, if you put it on the map of Dublin, the phone call, you draw the straight line between where she is and where Boylan is, it passes right through the part of Grafton Street where Bloom is standing at that time looking in a department store window. That is so much Joycean that I still suspect it's Boylan's secretary.